Hello and welcome to this episode of The Big Picture. My name is Tom Mukhwana, and today John Allen is going to be with us, but don't worry, you're in safe hands. I'm not doing this alone. I'm with Justine Wanda.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Justine. And we have a stacked show for you. First of all, we're going to have the head of operations in South Sudan for the Doctors Without Borders, Bwana Abdallah Hussein. And then after that, we're going to have Ian Mutiso, who's representing Boniface Mwangi, and we'll shed some light on the events that we've been seeing in Tanzania over the past 24 hours. Now, it's a good day for Africa Uncensored, mostly because we're having the big picture on. That's like reason number one, obviously. And then reason number two is we scooped 2 awards at the annual Journalism Excellence Awards by Media Council of Kenya on Friday last week. 2 winners in this room with us. You obviously can't see them because they're behind the scenes. But we have John Gaduna and Cynthia Gishiri, who won for Best Investigative Story in 2024. They did the story Fatal Deception that you might have heard about on the news over the past year. They're not alone. Sam Munia was nominated and was a finalist for Best Health Story. And Joy Kirigia was also nominated for Best Governance Story. The other winner is Africa Uncensored as an organization itself. Africa Uncensored won the best, we can say the best media house, I'd say. That's what I'd say, honestly, my opinion. But we won the Press Freedom Award, which is MCK's way of appreciating freedom of press here in Kenya. So Africa Uncensored, with the investigative stories that we've done over the past year and the years before, that was good. And thank you, Media Council. But this is more than anything a challenge for us to keep doing this, right?
Yeah. Wait,
So-
let's just pause for applause because you were just getting so serious. Oh, there's so many
Yeah,
winners.
yeah.
But it's like really cool that every single person in this organization is really just pushing all the stories that are important. And it's good to see that there's appreciation on that side. So congratulations to all the winners again.
And Justine, you yourself, you're doing excellent comedy that is shedding light on social issues. So we're proud to have you
Thank
here.
you so much. Maybe I'll win an award someday.
Yeah, but before we go on, Title Deal Season 2 launched, I think a month ago now. 3 episodes out. You probably haven't watched them, but we'll cue it up for you now. This is Title Deal Season 2 by Joy Kirigia. It's the second installment of our series on land corruption here in Kenya. It just blows the lid on these issues that are widely happening, but very rarely spoken of, especially exposed in the press as much as this series has done. So, yeah.
It was terrible. It looked like fiction. You know, it is like a movie.
The cartels are more powerful than the justice system. The cartels are well connected.
The deals aren't done. They just got darker.
I'm talking about very senior security officers, but they are the perpetrators. Do you carry documents?
No.
In your pocket?
No, you don't.
Season 2 of Title Deals is back, digging deeper into the power plays, land grabs and hidden hands, shaping who really owns Kenya.
Rico power! The Rico viva!
I'm not taking off you, I'm taking off the house.
I keep seeing the faces of the goons, over and over again. Just trying to find that piece has been really, really difficult.
If title deeds can go missing, what can't go missing?
If you put a thief in charge of a country, thievery becomes everybody's favorite pastime. Kila mtu atakuwa mwizi.
So go stream Title Deals Season 2. If you can, go to the first season so you get better context of what's happening in Kenya. But straight into the conversation, Abdallah Hussein, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm curious to know from the perspective of Doctors Without Borders. We've seen in the news about what's happening in South Sudan. We've read about it, right? Mm-hmm. But we don't know, you have background access that we probably do not have. Mm-hmm. So from approaching it from someone who doesn't know about South Sudan's events over the past month completely, would you please give us a brief explanation of exactly what's happening there?
Thank you very much for having, and thank you for your interest in what we do. South Sudan is a country that has been in crisis for a long time. And since 2018, there is a peace deal. There was a civil war 2013, 2018. But since 2018, there is a peace deal and there was relative stability in some parts of the country. However, that has changed since February, and we see a surge of violence in several parts of the country, especially the region of Upper Nile, as well as the Jonglei state, the central Equatorial state, which is where the capital Juba is located. And this situation is affecting the civilian population. The South Sudanese displacement of population is one of the consequences of that. We see huge numbers of people that are uprooted from their villages. The UN estimates that in mid-April, there was 125,000 people displaced. We think that number is way higher today in the last 1 month because the violence was also still growing. And it does also have an impact in terms of casualties. MSF has programs in different areas in the country, and we treated 270 wounded in the last 2 months. Yeah. And we still continue to receive wounded people in the areas where we are present, especially in Jonglei and Upper Nile.
So are the wounded people caught in the middle of the violence, or are they?
Yes, they are caught in the violence. Of course, there are combat activities that are happening near to civilian sites, populated areas. Just for your audience to know, we had one of our hospitals bombed in the 3rd of May, and the medical warehouse of the hospital was hit at 4:30 a.m. in the morning. The town of Al Fangak, which is in Jonglei State, in the north of Jonglei State. And this has, in this incident, we had 4 of our staff wounded. We had also 27 civilians that were wounded in the shelling of the town, and this includes women and children.
Yeah, and in the bombing of the hospital, this is obviously so scary to hear, Justine. But
yeah, it was a graphic. It was not the first incident that Doctors Without Borders has suffered. We had a hospital as well in south of Upper Nile, in a town called Ulang Hospital, in a very remote location. 5 years in place, serving 150,000 people. No other secondary healthcare in that area. And there was an advance of the army, from our South Sudanese army, into the area from the north in late April. And the population of the town fled. And as a result, our hospital was looted completely. So that hospital as well was shut down as a result of the violence.
I think from the details you're giving, a lot of people, when we watch the news or when we see these stories, there's a lot of stories that don't actually make it to the news. And I would like to ask what those stories are, because a lot of victims of violence and conflict are not usually interviewed because they're on the run, they're trying to get to safety. What are the stories about conflict that we don't get to see on the news?
Well, there's different levels of conflict that happens in South Sudan. Just to give you a background, the country, when the civil war started in 2013, there was 2 million people that were, more than 2 million actually, that were displaced to the neighboring countries. Ethiopia, in the border of Ethiopia and Gambela, in Uganda, in the camps close to South Sudanese border, in Sudan, in the region called White Nile, which is bordering in South Sudan and South Sudan. And that was the situation. The people stayed there in those refugee camps. Some of them also came here in Kenya, in this northeast of the country. And then, so there were also more than 2 million people as well that were displaced inside South Sudan. Yeah. That we stayed there. And of course, there were some people managed to go back to their home, and some did not because of insecurity. And recently, there was a war in Sudan that started in 15th April 2023. 2 years now, you have 1 million people that entered into South Sudan, and majority of them are South Sudanese. So imagine the South Sudanese that were displaced as a result of the violence in 2013, 2018, went to Sudan for safety, and now because of insecurity, went back to South Sudan. And it doesn't mean that places where they are going to is safe. So many of them stayed in camps on the border, with a lot of public health consequences, including outbreaks of diseases and overcrowded camps. So that is the condition we see, and this majority of them are women and children. Just to give you an anecdote, we were receiving South Sudanese that stayed also in Sudan back before the independence, that were pushed out of the country, and they came to South Sudan, and they don't even know the population because they were born in Sudan. And now they are identified as South Sudanese. They go to South Sudan, so it's quite catastrophic if you look at it in that sense.
And 2 million people, that's a lot of people. And you who's going in there to help for humanitarian supplies and also for medical supplies, you again get attacked because I've heard about a boat that was carrying Doctors Without Borders officials.
In January. Exactly, totally. So in January, basically for us, it's Doctors Without Borders. We are known to operate in conflict zones. We have experience in managing security, in being in contact with belligerents, what we call the people that are fighting, like parts that are to the conflict. And our expectation is that the civilian population has to be respected. Our job normally is to help people in need. We don't have a stake in the conflict as such. And those people can be people who are wounded, or what we call the hors de combat, or the people that are out of the combat, wounded person that might have been combatant. It can be a civilian population, normal, ordinary people that are caught in the violence. And South Sudan, what we see today in the last, since February, is the surge of attacks on hospitals and facilities, on medical workers. And this, of course, the consequence of that is what I just described. 2 of our hospitals shut down in just 1 month. And those hospitals, with 250,000 people relying on those 2 hospitals to go to them for care of women delivering, children that need to be vaccinated. A person who is living with a non-communicable disease like HIV or diabetes that get their drug from that hospital. Today they don't have. They are deprived of that, and not only they are deprived of that care, they are displaced from their home into the bush with the exposure of vector-borne diseases like malaria. That, for example, from the month of June, it pretty much, we call it the peak. We call it the peak. During that, for 5 months of the year, there is increase of malaria, and it's a very deadly disease, of course, especially for children under 5 years.
So this means that no medical supplies, no humanitarian work in those regions once attacks happen?
Well, actually, at the moment, we have 14 projects. We had 14 projects before the ones that I described. And those 14 projects are normally situated in the most affected places in the country. If you take the map of South Sudan, the most difficult places are where those hospitals of MSF are located. Some of them continue. We operate where the government controls, or where the opposition, because there are parts to the conflict. So we are distributed all over. We're still able to access many parts of the country, but there are some areas that we find difficult to access because of insecurity, but also because of the fear for our patients, for our medical personnel.
Because you are targeting those places.
Yeah, exactly. Even though we're trying to speak with also all the parts, to ask them for assurances that they don't target it. But unfortunately, the 3 incidents, including the boat that you described, which is also another incident that we had in January, our boat that just delivered supplies to one health facility with our personnel was attacked, were fired on, and the staff had to jump into River Nile to swim for safety. One of them was injured. It was quite catastrophic, but we are hoping that the parts of the conflict understand, that the medical mission doesn't need to be, attacked. And of course, the consequence of attacking is that the South Sudanese people
are affected.
Affected.
I think speaking, like you've spoken about women and children being the most affected in a lot of these conflict zones, but I wanted you to also kind of elaborate on the layers of violence that we see. I'll give an instance where I think it's a few months back where in the DRC, there were male prisoners who escaped, and then they went to the women's prison and they raped the women prisoners. And these stories are not usually highlighted as much as they should. And I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit on the layers of violence that women and children and vulnerable wounded people, especially in conflict zones, experience.
Yeah, that's a really good question. basically, majority of the people that are affected by the conflict, including those that are displaced, I say they came from South Sudan at the moment, or those that were inside South Sudan. Majority of the people that we see that are the primary impacted first place are actually women and children. And for women today, the highest mortality rate, one of the highest mortality rate in the world, is South Sudan. Women die for a variety of reasons, and one of the basic ones is access to maternal health care, access in a health facility that the woman can have the antenatal care, can get vaccination, can get the early diagnosis of her pregnancy, and where if there is a complication, she can go and she can get the care related to pregnancy. So that's one of the main ones. Of course, there are many other reasons why women are quite vulnerable, because of course in the conflict we see in many places sexual violence is one of the, in some parts of the country, is used as a weapon of war. But also in situations of war, it exposes women for many reasons. They walk in long distances to reach. For example, if you are displaced, the consequence, of course, is that you look refuge and you run most of the time in areas that you don't know what's going on.
Because you have to.
And there is no, when you get the place where you settle, there is no shelter, so it even exposes, the woman. For the children, it's a communicable disease that kill a lot. So, for example, when we work in northern Empire of Gaza, which is a region on the border with Sudan, so 1.4 million people, roughly, according to the government of South Sudan.
Yeah.
And in that location, the only secondary care health hospital for women and for the whole population is that managed by Doctors Without Borders. Of course, it's a structure of the Ministry of Health. We come in support. But basically, the maternity and child health is totally managed by the Doctors Without Borders. And what we see there, of course, is a collapse of the health system. There's no vaccination, is like under 50%. Normally, the standard is that at least for diseases like measles, you should have like over 90%. Otherwise, you have a risk that there is outbreaks. And we actually observed that, especially post-COVID. Recently, there is a cholera outbreak in the area, and it's imported from Sudan. Cholera outbreak that was happening in some parts of Sudan. I told you 1 million people were arriving. And one of the consequences of that is that people come with, of course, all kinds of problems. And one of them is the transfer of communicable disease. And it's one of the things we see.
Yeah.
And so it is really catastrophic in the sense of if you look at the communicable diseases, it's malaria and that simple diarrhea can kill very quickly if they are combined with malnutrition, and that's what we see today. There's also another problem that we observe is that the health system of South Sudan depends 80% on relief international actors. Like the government's input in terms of the financing is quite small, and a lot of actors that were giving finance in the health system now are withdrawing. The UK, the US, probably you have heard it. It's not only South Sudan; it affects Kenya here, and that's creates a big dilemma for us, because in many locations we fear to be alone. It has not affected. MSF doesn't take MSF, our acronym known as Doctors Without Borders. MSF, we don't take money from governments. 90% of our financing is private donors, individuals that collect. So it's not affecting us directly, but it affects indirectly because the other relief and humanitarian and health actors that were in the area are pulling out, and we see in some certain locations in South Sudan with that problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned these governments pulling out, but we were discussing this with Justine that there seems to be a wave of anti-immigration and pulling funds out of humanitarian efforts globally. So how does that then cripple the work that Doctors Without Borders does in such places?
Well, the consequence is that we will be overwhelmed. If we had a clinic in remote location and there was another organization working in the area and they pull out, of course people will come to you. And today we also have limited resources. We are not like what we put in the country is huge, amount. We have the 14 projects that we have is like we're spending like over 100 million euros in those projects. So it's very significant in terms of the effort we are doing. But we are not our resources are also limited. So organization pulling out or donors not being interested in the conditions of the population in South Sudan affects us as well because it will overstretch our capacity.
Yeah. And I can imagine this. Just imagine a country that systems aren't working and 100 million is just pulled out of it abruptly.
Yeah.
It means so much.
We should just call that place Kenya too, because I think a lot of the systems here are very reliant on donor funding. So we've seen that disappear and like education fall through the cracks, healthcare fall through the cracks. So this would leads up to my next question, where why should this particular East African region care? Because we've seen a lot of people, sometimes Kenyans can be very callous in their comments. They'll say, why should we care? We don't live in Sudan, we don't live in South Sudan, we don't live in the DRC, we don't live in conflict zones. But if those are our neighbors, and if people have to travel across borders to access help, to get aid, to get assistance, why should this region care very much about what's going on in Sudan? Why should we care about what's going on in South Sudan? Because they're not too far from us. Why should we care and not say things like that doesn't affect me?
There are plenty of reasons. I will be short on it. First one is that is a human being.
Yes.
We care as a human beings about human beings that are in difficult, and it's especially when there are disasters, because of war. What we're discussing here is very grave things. We're talking about war, we're talking about violence, we're talking about the outbreak of diseases, we're talking about natural disasters like floods. It is something that brings people together, and especially in the neighbors, countries that are South Sudan or Kenya, is people that are, it's problems sometimes affect us at the same time. When the floods were affecting in Kenya last year, they were also affecting in South Sudan. In fact, we were warning them from Uganda was warning, the IGAD was warning South Sudan down the stream of the River Nile to say the rain that's falling in Kenya and Uganda and the Great Lakes is going to create floods for you in South Sudan. So that's also interconnection, that the disaster, you don't know whether you are Kenyan or South Sudanese or Ugandan, it just affects us. The second reason is one of the big consequences of the situation of conflict is that it's a public health crisis. I just explained to you the cholera imported from Sudan. The country, South Sudan, has registered almost 50,000 cases the last time I checked. And it was just because there are cases coming from South Sudan, and it's just spread. And Kenya has a border with South Sudan. So it's quite evident, in terms of public health point of view, there's no border either.
Yeah.
It is quite easily. And of course, the communities as East African and not only from civil society and individuals, we care about what's happening in our neighborhood. But also it also concerns people who have influence in the region, in the tackling of the problems, including the political situation and eventually the humanitarian situation.
It's interesting that you went into that, because that was my final question. We've heard a lot about what's happening in Sudan and what power plays into this whole conflict that we're speaking about in Sudan and South Sudan. What effect does political interference of all levels have on your humanitarian work at Doctors Without Borders?
There are obstructions. We face obstructions. We faced in Sudan. We face in South Sudan to a certain degree. Interference can be that we are denied to access certain parts of the country because of unexplained reasons.
Yeah.
So it happens to us. It can be in form of bureaucracy, being denied with the permits, with the documentation that you need to move around the country. We do feel in South Sudan today, it's one of the concerns we have in certain parts of the country is indeed a question of access. How can we access the most affected areas based on need, not based on other considerations or political or ethnic or other reasons, but only purely on humanitarian needs, and we are able to sponsor. It's one of the questions we have, and we're discussing, of course, with all the parts that are concerned. in terms of in general, the way we operate around the world, we are quite independent. We don't. I just told you that we don't take money from any government, so no government dictates what we do. Of course, we have discussions with the communities that are affected, with governments that are affected. MSF is called for to help in situations of where our work is relevant, but we make our own decisions. We make our choices in terms of whether we intervene or not, whether we stay in South Sudan or not, whether we operate in that region or not. But of course, what the calculations and actions of external actors impact our way to our ability to work.
Yeah, absolutely. I know how much that can hamstring because you need safe corridors to deliver humanitarian supplies, right? And for even to go there, like the boat incident, that was targeted. But yeah, I'd love to have you back here, Hussein, to speak about the refugee crisis in Kenya, because up north there's something happening as well, Justine.
We have a lot of, I think, defunding of programs that help refugees, and I think Uganda has taken in a lot of the refugees that come from South Sudan, and a lot of the refugees that are also coming from Sudan, and that defunding of those particular programs or just removal of any kind of aid creates a vacuum that's going to be detrimental to a lot of people, and I think that's a discussion we should have.
Maybe may I take one final note just to remind you where we work in Kenya as well. So Doctors Without Borders, we have a long history in the country, and at the moment we operate in Homa Bay. We are doing a treatment of HIV and non-communicable diseases. We're also present here in Nairobi, in Mathare. We're working with gender-based violence and violence in urban areas. We respond to that. We work with the Minister of Health, all our close partner in the country. We also operate in the refugees camps with Somalia on the border, Dagale, and long history for a long time that we were working in that area as well. We work also in Mombasa, working with groups that have limited access to care, medical care, and of course we respond to emergencies, supporting the government of Kenya, depending on the gaps.
I think I remember when there was a heavy rains and then a building collapsed around Naivasha Road. MSF was one of the first people to respond.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, all that said and done, I think Hussein, thank you so much for coming. But we'd love to have you back because those are also things that are hamstrung in Kenya right now, right? So yeah. Thank you so much, Hussein Abdallah. Would love to have you here again. Now to the second part of this discussion with Ian Mutiso. He's the lawyer, one of the lawyers of Boniface Mwangi, who you know by now is detained in Tanzania because of his support for Tundu Lissu, who was to be arraigned in court today. That's the second part of this discussion. But Justine, so much has been happening over the past week. There's so much happening. I like to say this, that there's something that hasn't happened in Kenya in history that is happening now. So past 24 hours, we've seen the Emeritus Chief Justice of Kenya, Willy Mutunga, being arrested at the airport in Dar es Salaam, Julius Nyerere International Airport.
That is very ironic. Being arrested at Julius Nyerere International Airport, a man who fought for Jumuiya of the region.
I know.
For helping out someone in the region is one of the most ironic things I've ever seen. And I think there's also a loss of partnership from the top parts of not from the top parts, from like what are they called? The people who police the region. Instead of working together to like secure the borders and help the citizens, we're seeing more of cop situations and patrolling and extra policing and surveillance too. And I'm like, really, this is what we're doing? I know this is like, again, I think I've made this joke before, but like this is not the Jumuiya or like the coming together that Nyerere wanted. He didn't want us to come together so that we can be overly policed. He wanted us to come together so that we can help each other and like
freedom.
Make
Unity of democracy, right?
Exactly.
But Ian Mutiso is getting ready to join us on set. Before he does, let's run episode 3, the trailer of Title Deals, the one that I mentioned early in the show.
In the next episode, We return to Westlands and South B in Nairobi. Two neighborhoods where forceful evictions and demolitions disrupted lives and livelihoods.
I have worked to buy this house. It wasn't very easy. So I'm not giving it up on it. And I'm going to have it back. Wait for me, I know I have it back.
Unapiga picha. Kama iko kugopa, then you should be worried. If you don't have anything to worry, then you wouldn't worry.
2 years later, what has changed? What hasn't? And what does it say about land justice in Kenya today?
We've been out of this place for 2 years until today, 2024, is when we are back to our premises. I mean, it's shocking to see what we found.
It seems that Kenya is run by goons and not by police.
Yep, thanks for being with us and staying with us. So Ian Mutiso, the one I mentioned right before the show, went on break. He's a lawyer representing Boniface Mwangi, who's detained in Tanzania for being present in the country, while Tundu Lissu, who's the opposition leader in Tanzania, is being arraigned in court. There's so much that can go into this conversation, but I'm not here to do that. Ian is here to do that. So Ian, quick update on what's happening to Bonnie.
As a lawyer, as somebody who is upfront on human rights matters, I'm concerned on the safety for Bonnie.
Yeah.
At the same time, I am worried about the citizens of Tanzania. It seems things are likely going to get worse before they get better. And at this particular moment, I'm just grateful to the Tanganyika Law Society for them being so quick to reacting when I called upon them, and it's been a very long day, I can tell you that.
Say you've been up since 12.
Yeah, I literally got the 911 call at around 12:30, around 1 a.m. So I haven't been able to sleep since that time. And what happened was that when I got the message that Bonnie is currently being harassed by police officers in Tanzania and he's barricaded himself in his hotel room, I actually, for a moment, it didn't register to me. I had forgotten he had actually gone there. So when I quickly tried to get a hold of him and realized he's unreachable, now I knew things were off the wall. And one thing that you realize is when he doesn't just go AWOL, just like that. He's always reachable one way or another. We have mechanisms on how to get a hold of him in case of something that does happen. So at that particular point, I realized this was a big, like a serious issue. And fortunately enough, I managed to see the videos before they went online on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that was when now I started now getting a hold. I think my first call was to PLO Lumumba. I tried to get a hold of him because he's the most senior bar member who can practice in Tanganyika.
Yeah.
And from there now was to try and call individual council members from the Tanganyika Law Society. So fortunately, the people I've worked with here and there on a few issues, I sit on a few boards on non-communicable diseases. So I've engaged a lot of human rights lawyers on healthy diets. So those are people I immediately reached out to. Each one of them knew me calling me at that particular hour must have been something very serious. So they picked up, and I think the way they responded has been very commendable, because I think that whole pressure and the fact there were Kenyans who were awake at that hour, it just sparked a whole wave that just kept on increasing from 1 a.m. all the way to throughout the whole day. So,
but the fact that you're even awake at, because I think Boniface Mangi went live on Twitter at 2 in the night, sometime around
Yeah,
there.
it was really,
And the fact that someone is calling from a different country at that time and they're being arrested or threatening arrests in your territory, it's, and in the video you can feel the fear Boni has in his voice, because Tanzania, as we've seen over the past few months, has had abductions and extrajudicial killings. So it could be you. But then this points to something far more sinister. A wave of autocracy that is sweeping across East Africa, and at the center of it all seems to be Kenya. For some reasons.
I think also this is like a regional hub for atrocities. Like Kenya is just like, we're going to host, like, are you the worst person? We have a seat here. Like, we keep seeing that being replicated again and again. I think the thing that is throwing people off, especially with the Tanzanian case, is people thought like, Tanzania, your people are so progressive and like you're so chill. Why are you abducting
Female
people?
leader.
Yeah, like there was like a perception of who their president is, and also the perception of her being a woman. By virtue of her being a woman, like there was almost like, oh, she's not going to fall into the trappings of like authoritarianism. And do you think we're looking at leadership all wrong? In a way, because a lot of people keep leaning into the same kind of, how do I say this, perception that just because this person is a woman or because this person has gone through this, like they would never hold the line for something so bad.
It's it's quite unfortunate that we're first of all experiencing this from us being Kenyans, from that standpoint. And also, we have to acknowledge that we are living in times whereby those who didn't get to experience Moi are experiencing a student of Moi. And those who were friends or are friends with Museveni are getting to experience what Ugandans tend to live on a daily basis. And it's no secret that our president is also quite close with Slu. And one of the key things that's making me make this bold statement is the fact that for the past few months that Slu has been in power, one of the few things that we have realized is that activists face the same hostility, repercussions, death, disappearance, torture, harm, and threats in the same manner that activists and Kenyans face here. So there's a sort of like a book on torturing its own citizens that is going from country to country.
It's like they're passing the notes.
And it's just sharing ideas. So if you do this, this is what you're going to experience. So what will happen is that Museveni wasn't quite aware of the impact of Kenyans crossing the border to assist their own brothers and sisters in Uganda. Suluhu wasn't about to take that nonsense from anything. So immediately the fact that it was coinciding with the fact that advocates and activists were interested in participate, rather getting to observe the hearing of the prominent lawyer Tundu Lissu, she just had to try to do it differently. And different means that trying to harass whoever comes to show any form of support. Because you don't want the opposition to be strong. What she doesn't realize is that this type of actions tend to make even the opposition stronger. So I think she should be able to try and learn from Moi's experience. One way or another, keep pushing people, freedom is going to come. Tanzanians are just learning. And surprisingly, I think what today has taught me, I think the Tanzanian lawyers have learned something from Kenyan advocates.
They have, absolutely.
And
Even Ugandan
I think,
lawyers and
I think we have sparked something there today. I can assure you we have sparked something.
I'm just reading an update here from Samia Suluhu and President Samia Suluhu under statement on the arrests. To paraphrase, it reads here that she will not allow foreign activists to quote-unquote invade and destabilized Tanzania after 6 Kenyan activists were deported from the country. Now, I could say things that I've read online about what Boniface Mwangi and the CJ, the former CJ, were there to do, but what was Boniface Mwangi there to do in Tanzania?
I personally cannot be able to disclose that. It's only Boniface who can be able to tell. My role in the life of Boniface is to always not only give legal advice, but he's also a close friend. It's the reason why I found a wife. So for me, he's more than just a client. And I also tend to resonate with the works that he has done for Kenyans here and what he has been able to do for this country. So as far as what he intended to do in Tanzania, it's only him who knows. But I know for a fact that he has a lot of people who follow his work in Tanzania, and he has a lot of passion for the people of Tanzania, especially in trying to give them a voice. And I think also it is a well-known fact that he is also a follower of Tundu Lissu's work. So I'm not surprised. Boni has been to Tanzania so many times. I'm just surprised. This is the first time he's actually been deported from an African country. So
Okay, so I think this whole immigration thing is getting out of hand. We can't just keep deporting Africans back to their own countries because we don't like what they're coming to do or like who they're standing with. So I will ask, do you think there's a danger in regional, not a danger, but a general threat or like a learning curve for the regional experience and regional cooperation between advocates across the East African belt? Like, do you think they're going to be more strengthened ties to work together to prevent these kinds of situations in the future? And also, are there going to be consequences, not just like for the people in power, but like how each country operates, especially with regards to how people work in those countries? I'll give an example of Martha Karua when she went to for the BCG case, right? She was denied like a work permit, and then they just tried to gather all these different hurdles. So do you think this is going to change in the future, where how countries work together or how people in the region work in the different countries? Because if they keep putting hurdles, some people might give up, or some people might become like really more bold in like pushing for regional safety and regional jumuiya.
So I think you've sort of like struck a conversation that was even circulating in different advocates group. So there are two schools of thoughts, and it's split between two groups of advocates. There are those advocates who are saying, ban the EAC. There is no reason why we should have this community cooperation, yet there is no justification on how we should be working together. And then there is another school of thought, of which I'll put myself in there. So in Kenya, we are the only jurisdiction whereby you actually tend to have more lenient rules for other advocates coming out from Uganda or Tanzania to come and practice in Kenya. It's way simpler for them to come and do that. But as far as Kenyan advocates going to practice in Tanzania or Uganda, you have to go through a whole stringent regulations for you to practice there. So these are one of a few things that the relationship is kind of very one-sided at this particular point. But also at the same time, I think the leadership from the Law Society of Kenya, per se, is trying to give our neighbors understanding to actually show that it is actually beneficial if you get to have even advocates from Kenya be able to come to your jurisdiction, because there's certain fights you may not be ready for, but we are willing to do it, to go the extra mile for you. And they need to really reconsider those particular stringent rules. So the headache Martha faced, Senior Counsel Martha faced, well, in Uganda, those are things which were totally embarrassing. And I think Uganda also learned a lesson from that. And I think there have been discussions on how to revise those particular rules. And we have a president for the East African Law Society, Rama, who's trying so much to bring changes which will actually make us work in a cooperative manner. So I think in the long run, our neighbors realize that we actually want the best for them. At the same time, I think it's way better that we can have a transparent way of working together so that you can also open the economy.
Yes.
Because I can tell you for a fact, advocates from Tanzania and Uganda and Rwanda, if they come to practice in Kenya, it will be very beneficial to them. And likewise for Kenyans there. So in the long run, I really don't think that we should rush, rather the advocates who are trying to push the president to try and say, we're going to start now walking away from this East African society. I think we should just give it time. There's no point of, not going to support our brothers and sisters, especially in these countries. And that goes also for the diplomatic relationships that we do have. It's unfortunate that we are a country whereby we're being led by crazy people, and diplomacy in Kenya has gone to the depths of hell.
There are no standards.
There are no standards. And it has gotten to a point whereby even from when we have a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it doesn't carry the weight in Africa as the way it used to be. You can easily use it as a tissue paper once they print it. So my thoughts, and just to answer you, is that right now we're kind of divided, but I think in the long run, these are type of things that will shape us to be better. And I think one way or another, our neighbors are learning from us in a sort of way. So each of us are having bad presidents.
Yes.
For no doubt, each one of us is going through a very bad relationship, and the other countries are just looking and watching exactly what's going to happen. So at the end of the day, I think the light at the end of the tunnel looks brighter, but we'll have a serious heartbreak soon. Yeah.
And speaking of Samia Suluhu and her learning, her people learning from Kenya, she obviously isn't happy about that.
Yeah.
Because she issued a strong statement that I paraphrased earlier. But we'll run that clip because she stood for what she believed is true.
She stood 10 toes down on anti-immigration.
Yes, 10 toes down.
Come on, man. Your name is Suluhu, man.
I mean, we laugh about this, but it's a very serious situation because people have turned up dead in Tanzania and no explanations. So let's run that clip.
Tumeanza kuona mtiririko au mwenendo wa wanaharakati ndani ya region yetu hii kuanza kuvamia na kuingilia mambo yetu huku. Sasa kama kwao wameshadhibitiwa, wasije kutuharibia huku. Tusitoe nafasi. Walishaharibu kwao, walishavuruga kwao. Nchi iliyobaki haijaharibika. Watu wako na usalama na amani na utulivu ni hapa kwetu. Kuna majaribio kadhaa. Niwaombe sana vyombo vya ulinzi na usalama na nyinyi wasimamizi wa sera zetu nje kutoa nafasi.
That was moments ago, Samia Suluhu giving a statement on the arrest of a bunch of Kenyans. First it was Martha Karua and 2 other activists, then now it's Boniface Mwangi, Hanifa Aidan, who was with us here last week, by the way, and CJ Emeritus Willy Mutunga. David Maraga, however, who's also a former CJ, got there through safely, and he attended court, and you saw him shaking hands with Tundu Lissu, who's, I believe, an old friend. But now that we've established that there is an autocracy that lives and dwells and is spreading like a virus across East Africa, there's another thing that we saw over the past 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks ago, Justine, if I'm not wrong, the arrest of 4 filmmakers in Nairobi because of their perceived participation in the filming of the documentary by BBC Africa, Blood Parliament. And you represent some of them, if not all of them. You might correct me on that. What are the charges and how does that case look now?
So I do represent all of them on behalf of the Law Society of Kenya. And it's very unfortunate that even as I sit here today, I don't know what they're going to be charged with. I just know what appeared on the occurrence book in Pangani Police Station and what appeared on the occurrence book in Muthaiga Police Station. And that was they're intending to charge them with publication of false information. And the false information being referred therein is the Blood Parliament documentary. Well, the sad part is that BBC already came out with a statement and said that these guys were nowhere involved in that. That's in ink. This government believes BBC is sort of like hiding them or something. I don't know what's going in the back of their minds.
You had the whole government, all government proponents coming out to say that BBC is a foreign nation that is trying to drive an agenda here. So that's their stance.
And
I don't think they'd believe them.
If honestly I could be able to undertake private prosecution proceedings, I would actually go for this KJ guy. But he made those statements in the floor of Parliament. They're protected statements. I can't do anything about them. That notwithstanding, it's very shameful that people think that this particular documentary is actually false. This is basically professional journalists. There's a whole media house, international media house. They just came with a mirror and told us, look
at yourself.
Look at yourself. The thing is, that particular documentary, the government is not specifying what actually is false, because when it's kind of very important when you allege something is false, you have to specify. So even like take it for defamation. If I come and say something, you have to go and quote that defamatory statement in court. So the government has not gone and stated what is false about it. And then the other concerning thing is that when these guys were being arrested, they were dumb enough not to see the video cameras. And the video cameras there have audio.
Oh, yes.
So the arresting officers, we could hear exactly what they were saying. When this guy was going out to pick up a call, I could tell he was getting instructions from somebody. And this particular officer who was trying to undertake this arrest, he was trying so hard to be within the confines of Article 49, to the point whereby he's the only person who introduced himself, but he did not get to tell my clients on why they're being arrested. And something else that they said, and that's why I'm being very aggressive with this matter, he said we are conducting an operation. So it tells me they were targeting journalists. They were targeting anybody who documented or played a role in the BBC documentary.
Yes.
That's why I'm very, very, I'm very aggressive on this particular case, because the moment I'm not, and the moment the LSK is not on top of it, it tells me that more people are going to be under harassment.
Yes.
The freedom of the press is not even going to be something which is going to be ongoing any longer. The freedom of expression is going to be a thing for the past. So that's the only reason why I'm keeping these guys on their toes. I've already filed an application to review those orders for the search warrants, which were illegal. And it's going to be an interesting week, because I am going with my clients to the DCI on Wednesday for the interrogation. So we'll see. Yeah.
I think the thing that really throws me off, especially about how state resources are used, is when it comes to extreme cases like what happened to the Endarasha kids.
Oh, yes.
When we see a lot of kids were tear gassed a few weeks ago because of a play, and who was even in charge, who gave those orders? Because those are the things that should be continually investigated. We saw Baby Pendo's case was dropped because of quote-unquote lack of evidence. And it wasn't just Baby Pendo, there were 39 other protesters that were targeted and killed. And there's so much of the cycles of violence that we see, and state resources that are supposed to go to those particular cases are almost never there.
Yeah.
We just see the DPP dropped the case, or something happened and the case doesn't get the proper treatment that it should. But when it comes to just like a sideshow, I don't have any other word for it. Whenever there's a sideshow where the government has to act tough, that's where we keep seeing the state resources go. They've arrested people who are making memes. They like it's so petty.
Yeah.
Like the fight is so petty and unwarranted. And what does this mean for the state to set the precedent? Like, we're only gonna go after cases that are seemingly meaningless to kind of just keep people in limbo instead of the actual cases where people are particularly harmed. Yeah.
And speaking of arrests, we've just seen a number of ESCC invasions into the office. I think it was George Natembeya. And also Rigathi Gachagua,
The
right?
residents retaliated.
Oh yes, they what's the word for? What they did is they punctured the tires of those ESCC vehicles that were there.
Yeah.
I'm so surprised that they weren't tear gassed. I'm genuinely impressed by the restraint that they've exercised in that moment because.
Or maybe the stock imeisha.
Maybe stock imeisha.
Yeah.
Maybe Lisha. They ran out of ammo.
Yeah.
But Ian, what does this show for Kenya? So many arrests, as Justina said, and I don't know if you guys saw the ODPP's statement on the cases and how they're being investigated by POA, the cases that were forwarded to him. Around 50% of them had lack of evidence dropped, further investigations.
What do they do?
But they somehow seemingly have all the evidence for all these political arrests that we've been seeing over the past day. And on top of that, to pursue people like those filmmakers, you have this entire state machinery set out on these people to charge them, and I know this is exhausting for them.
Yeah.
What does this do to somebody who's seeking to practice, for instance, those filmmakers? It was their journalism, their expression.
Yeah.
What does this do to them? Because you represent them, but when they go home and beyond these headlines, what's their life?
There is something that happens when you experience your rights being violated. It's never a good experience, but it'll always teach you something very profound. It will teach you not to be a doormat again. So one of the key reasons why I'm so motivated on matters of rights of an arrested person is because I've also experienced an illegal arrest before, whereby somebody who had power sought fit for him to misuse that power. And because I was trying to break the noise on something, that they sought to punish me for it. And why I'm so dedicated on doing my cases under the umbrella of Law Society is because the Law Society came through for me. And that whole experience realized how important the Law Society is. Now come to these 4 filmmakers that I'm representing. I don't think this whole experience has actually killed their spirit. It's actually made them to be more motivated to keep on doing whatever they want. The only issue is that their legs are kind of cut off because they need the gadgets that they are supposed to be using are in the possession of the investigators. It was detained illegally, and I'm fighting that. But at the same time, I think once you leave, you sort of have that type of experience, you kind of now look at that person like, this guy is my age mate. We do the same thing. Yeah. This thing has made like the youth of this country like be very pissed off with this government because they see themselves in the same shoes. And at this particular point, I think as we go through this whole experience together, I know for a fact that they're not going to give up, and it's just going to be a domino effect. Whatever we're doing right now, it's going to prevent somebody else from being abducted. It's going to prevent somebody else from being harassed. And something very interesting that is said about like the cases of George Natembeya, how the state machinery is just coming after people who are not towing the line. There certain cases such as like the Rex Masai, of which I had the privilege of going there for the inquest, I saw how quickly they investigated the death of the MP, Honorable Were. And for something which pisses off close to over 20 million Kenyans on a death of a youthful guy, that same zeal has not been disposed. I was there when the main witness was giving his testimony. Literally, it's there. Like the facts are there, yet the police are just not, IPOA is not being as swift or aggressive to undertake its obligations, but time will tell. That case is actually going to tell me where this government is heading to in terms of holding people accountable. But something else we're doing as a law society, if a police officer comes and arrests you legally, detains you legally, does not inform you of your reason why you're being arrested, continues to confiscate your items illegally, we are suing them personally. We already had cases whereby individual people have been penalized to pay a certain amount to people who have felt their rights violated. Was it last year? There were petitioners who were awarded 200,000 each for having their rights violated. So in this case, even in the petition, the miscellaneous application for judicial review that I did, I've specifically listed
the names,
each name of the officer who went to arrest these 4 filmmakers. It's only one lady, and I believe this is a lady within the intelligence community. I could not find where she went. She just disappeared. I have no idea where she went. I've been trying to find out who she is. I might end up compelling one of the senior officers to come and disclose who that person is, because I believe that's the sect which is like going after people and stuff.
And abductions.
Yeah, so we're going to do them one by one until they toe the line. Yeah.
I think what's dangerous about the precedents that we've seen, especially with the arrest of those filmmakers, and it's the return of media strangulation. It's the government grabbing the media by the throat, and not the media that you see on TV, but it could mean so much for other people.
Yes.
Aside from them who are documentary filmmakers, probably freelance, it could mean so much for even us here at Africa Uncensored. What stops, if this case goes on and these gentlemen are prosecuted and charged with these crimes successfully in the court of law, what stops the government from walking inside the studio that we are recording right now to grab our cameras and accuse us of treason or anything worse? Because the government did call people who protested treasonous elements.
Yes.
So it's good that you're setting precedents for fighting against this, and it is our wish that the gentlemen are freed. But we've sadly come to the end of the show. Before we end it, in good big picture tradition, Justine, do your weekly rant.
I don't even have a rant this week, man. I feel like, first of all, a woman I was rooting for let me down so bad this week, man. Like President Samia, like solutions is literally in your name. Like you should have like done one up for us, but you decided to go with all these horrible fellas. Like you went left, and I think that's what makes it really painful, because usually she's called Mama. And she's like, I'm going to do the most anti-mama shit you've ever seen in your life.
Watch me.
Yeah. She was like a bad mom this week. Like, if you're going to, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we should not trust all mamas. Some of them are kind of trash. And I think that's the thing we have to contend with. Like, not every single person you're rooting for is going to be awesome. And the second thing is that I saw a story about Naivas versus Nairobi County, and they were being shut down because some of their food is expired. And all Naivas shoppers, I'm sorry, but it's like they didn't shut them down. Like Naivas kind of just ignored them, which I think is a really funny way to go about it. It's just like you people are going to continue talking, and we're gonna keep selling expired stuff It's you're at least going to supposed to walk into the supermarket and find the expired things. Like show some drive.
Audacity.
Put in some work in it. And lastly, I saw today a story that really made me happy. I saw that there's dustbins in Nairobi, and it has come after, I think, years of Kenyans complaining. This is not a congratulation message to the dimpled person and the other yapper who's always taking photos. It's not for you. This is what you should be doing in the first place. Like, this county is supposed to function for everyone. So having dustbins in the CBD is just probably like a very small step. You should fix the drainages. We cannot keep sailing in boats in town. Like, we can't keep doing this. You guys have to do your jobs, and don't send goons to people's houses who disagree with you, man. Like, do better. And just to the East Africa region, you people have really let every single one of your citizens down, and now you're doing like a regional exchange program of letting even the neighbors down. And we need you to get it together. If you're going to rule over people, you have to listen to them. You have to care about them. You need to stop killing them, stop shooting them, stop abducting them. What they're asking of you is actually very little. And the least you can do is actually do your jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I hope that we're not going to see some videos from CBD, from is it CEC
Bosire
for
is
help?
somewhere with a camera. He's already out there. It's gonna be like, look, we
Live
brought you
streaming.
dustbins. Bro, people are gonna use those dustbins as
Yeah.
boats. When God's award.
I think the saying is, don't congratulate a fish for swimming.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what you should have been doing from the beginning.
Yeah.
We won't clap for you for that. But I would like to close this today's show, with reminding you that we just took another $1.5 billion Eurobond. So this pushes the current public debt from 10.5 trillion,
Trillion,
10.5 trillion to 11 trillion. I think it is 11 trillion. Yeah, just slightly above 11 trillion. And while this is happening, this was part of it taken to buy back another Eurobond that is meant to mature in 2027. But there's also something that's happening in the pockets of government. Aside from getting money from loans, which is robbing Peter to pay Paul, basically just taking one loan to pay another one and moving on with life. It's similar to kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
Just pushing this problem forward to probably solve it in the next 1 year. Aside from that, we also have the Deputy President, Kindiki, asking for over 600 million shillings for hospitality, travels, and a bunch of other shenanigans there.
Has he tried walking?
I don't think he's tried that.
He should try walking. Like, I think for a full week, or not even a full week, a full year.
I don't
If
think the
they're
strides
really-
would get too far.
No,
but-
look, if they're really trying to go somewhere, they should try walking.
Yeah, perhaps they should. Perhaps they should, or running.
Yeah.
But they don't want that, Justine. They want more money from the taxes that you're paying.
Unfortunately, most of the money that's being spent on these things is money that's supposed to go to education. We've seen the Kenya National Examination Council
Don't even
being
have money.
sidelined and being like, we don't have money for you. Healthcare. Babies don't have vaccines. People were tweeting, asking for vaccines from random, like a tweet to save your child from polio and measles and
Yeah. It's saddening. It's saddening, right?
redacted. I'm not going to say what I was going to say.
Please hold that. We want to keep these hard drives after the show. So yeah, Ian, do you have anything you want to close the show with? Something we might have missed?
I think I just want to send a quick message to the state actors.
Yeah.
The director of DCI, I've been in your office so many times. IG, I've been making calls to you so many times. To every other DCI officer that I know in Nairobi, I've been to the nearest police station there. The only reason that I come there to you is because of Article 49. Let's learn how to treat citizens, as human beings. You're here to protect them. You're not here to undertake orders of Mkubwa. I will do this for as long as I have lungs, for as long as I have my hands, my eyes. I'll do it for as long as I can be able to do. And I'll do this with the support of the Law Society of Kenya. I will not stop. I will not relent. Let's do things the right way. That's all.
Sobering way to end the show, right? What a question mark. And I think that's what everyone should be doing. People should just do their job and not kill people for a living. Now, that's the end of the show today. John Allen will probably be back next week, but don't worry, if he doesn't come back, Justine and I have you covered.
We got you.
Ian, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I think this conversation is a conversation that should be had going forward, that people shouldn't take this sitting down. Do what you can and shout about the things that matter to you, because someone else's arrest for nothing could be your death in the next year for just being somewhere at the wrong time, maybe, because the police shoot seemingly anyone these days and call it responding to an act of treason. That's a way to end the show. Thank you for being with us. Have a good night from wherever you're watching us. Remember to go watch Title Deals, the season 2 of this series. And congratulations to Sam Munia, Cynthia Gishiri, and Uncensored, the whole team, right? Let's just clap for everyone. And everyone and everyone who makes this show possible. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers and have a good night.